What's good, tinfoilers? The 5th episode of Season 2, titled Descent, picks up the pace and the action is intense. This episode is filled with frenetic energy and a rapidly shifting plot. When we left off, Juliet had secured a working suit and was heading back to her old silo, but now she faces a new obstacle and a set of challenges. Shirley, Knox, Walker, and Claire are on the run, with Judicial hot on their heels. Meanwhile, Bernard remains as unyielding as ever, and the grudge he's been holding against Sims is about to come to a head in this episode. Watch out now, there are spoilers in this video, so make sure you're okay with that before you continue watching. Real quick shout out to the patrons. These fine specimens you see here are the executive producers of this show. Also, I want to give a warm welcome to the newest members. Tinfoiler Detective, great name by the way, Georgina Toland, Jennifer, and Mary. Thank you so much for choosing to support my work in this way. I genuinely appreciate it. Look forward to seeing your name in the closing credits going forward. You know what comes next. It's time to dive. So we start this episode off in Silo 18. The gang from Mechanical are doing their best to avoid an angry mob that's lathered up and ready to do some bodily harm. They're in a bit of a jam because the angry mobs are not only on the floors above them, but the ones below them as well. So they're going to need some help getting past them with their limbs intact. Claire, using her connections as head of supply, reaches out to a retired porter to help them find a safe passage back to the lowers. You immediately get the sense that this guy is not someone you can completely trust. But beggars can't be choosy. Unfortunately for our crew, this guy ends up snitching on them, so the group's gotta move on right away. So let's move over to the Sims residence. Now Sims and Camille are discussing the predicament Robert stepped into when he chose to impeach Judge Meadows. Bernard made it very clear that he blames Sims for her death, so retribution will arrive at any moment, maybe even right now. Bernard is in his creepy mode and he's decided to just pop in on Sims for a cup of joe. Bernard isn't interested in coffee though. What he does want to know is how involved Camille might be in the situation, but he's also here to make an announcement. He's got a job change in mind for our guy Bobby. Bernard makes Sims replace Meadows as the judge, which is in reality a demotion despite the lofty title. Bernard has essentially iced Sims out of the inner circle. He's more of an outsider now, and he's not happy with that. Bernard makes it clear that the only reason he's keeping him around is because he might be useful to him later. But like I said in the last episode breakdown, there is a lane opening for Sims to go against Bernard, and he can do a lot of damage because of what he knows, and he's still feared by a lot of people in the silo. These two aren't about to roll over just yet. They're already talking about their next move. Robert and Camille have a new objective, and it's to nullify the new head of security, which is this guy, Amundsen. The hope here is that Bernard will have to reconsider and reinstate Sims should this guy fail. In other words, they want to end this man's whole career. Now Sims is making big moves here, but you know what they say about aiming for the king. So now we're back in Silo 17 with Juliet and Solo. Juliet's got the fire suit, but there's an issue. The helmet that she has doesn't fit the suit, so now she's got to find one that does. In the middle of the discussion about the subject, two big pieces of information drop for us. One is that the IT department has an independent power source that is off-site. We don't find out the details, but this is big. It seems that the founders set up an external power station to keep all of the IT departments running in what is basically a network, but it could mean more than that. Immediately after hearing this, the idea that there might be some outside entity running the power station becomes a possibility. This person or people could be observing everything on all the silos, and who knows, maybe even making decisions. The giant experiment theory is starting to look really good right now. It's the idea that all of these silos are part of a grand experiment that requires them to stay in the silos for generations. The idea is that you can't explore the surface because then the Truman Show falls apart. Anyway, there's more here. We learn why the lower parts of the silo are flooded out. Judicial busted up a water pump to curb the rebels in Mechanical during the rebellion of Silo 17, but the damage was worse than intended. Also, Solo thought it might be a good idea to tell us that the water line is rising, and in less than a year, it will reach the vault. So now he's got an idea. Solo thinks Jules should be a pal and fix it, but she's got more pressing issues to deal with right now. Back over to Silo 17. Cooper's murder case is still ongoing. Billings and Hank learn that Patrick Kennedy is in the wind, nowhere to be found. They also get the news about Sims and his new job change, the story on Meadows and her so-called perpetrators from Mechanical, all in one go. Now is it me, or do you get the sense that Billings is on course to become the next sheriff to lead the rebellion from the lowers? Just like in Silo 17. Now back to our fugitives in Silo 18. They've chosen to split up into pairs to be a little less conspicuous. Shirley with Knox, Walker with Claire. Claire tells Walker that they too need to split up because she might be recognized in this part of the silo, while Walker is a stranger to everyone up here. Walker doesn't want to leave Claire, but she sees the logic in it, and she heads out despite her feelings on it. Pop Nichols runs into Kathleen Billings for the first time. Before they can get into anything, judicial goons show up demanding that Pops comes with them to see Bernard. When Dr. Nichols arrives, Bernard puts on the politician hat, but everyone in the room knows that this is nothing more than a psychological game being played. So what Bernard is really doing here is he's reminding Pops to keep it on the hush. Don't become a problem by spreading any ideas of hope to people over his daughter's remaining effects. Pops shows his hand because he's got nothing to lose, as he puts it. The silo has taken everything he loves and made a mockery of his profession. He's not exactly threatening Bernard, but he's stepping as close to that line as possible because he even insinuates that the official story on Juliet's cleaning, well, it's suspect, which is pretty gutsy. But he also makes another good point. No matter what tricks Bernard tries to pull, he can't stop this train from coming. And you can see by Bernard's expression that deep down at the bottom of his cold mechanical heart, he knows this is true. This man is shook. More weird stuff comes up in passing conversation between Jules and Solo. Apparently, Romeo and Juliet has an alternative ending in Silo 18. In this story, they don't die in the end. This isn't the first time we've come across this kind of slight discrepancy in the Silo's respective versions of history. Very interesting. As if she didn't have enough to deal with, Juliet is showing signs that she's coming down with something, and it might be her worst nightmare. The tear in her suit led to her skin being exposed to the outside atmosphere when she was on the surface, and she's been infected. Not knowing the circumstances, Solo rushes off to get her some food while she tries to gather herself. Bernard is hard at work trying to round up the four mechanicals, but he's only managed to grab Claire so far, and it's not like she really put up a fight. Note how Bernard always implements methods to control the crowd by trying to direct their anger at his victims. This is Lucas Kyle after one day in the mines. Bernard brings in Lucas for a talk after he's had a taste of life in the mines, so he knows the trauma is still fresh in his mind here. He makes a deal with him. If he's able to salvage any data from the broken hard drive that he confiscated from Jules in season 1, well, he doesn't have to go back to the mines right away. Now, during the lead up to this deal, he even tells him that his sentence was essentially a death sentence because the lifespan of a typical miner can be counted on one hand. Bernard needs the letter from Salvador Quinn from that drive. No doubt the encoded part of the letter is what he's really after. The only thing we know about Salvador is that he was the head of IT in Silo 17. But it's interesting that Bernard tells Lucas that he chose him to do this task. His official answer is obviously nonsense, but what he really is doing here is asserting power, reminding him of how easily he could ruin his already miserable life, but it comes with the added benefit of keeping whatever Lucas finds on that drive to himself. So Sims is sniffing around his old stomping grounds because he's no longer authorized to be in the hidden parts of the silo. He runs into Amundsen, and the conversation lets us know that he's poking around the Meadows case in particular, no doubt looking for a way to influence things in his favor. So let's go over to Knox and Shirley. Now they're scrambling down the stairs. They run into a mob that eventually IDs them as the so-called killers on the run. Camille Sims pops up in her old Raider uniform to stop the beating and move them to a safe spot. Camille turns this random guy's home into a safe house because she's got leverage over him for some reason. What's really wild is what this guy says before he leaves his home to them. He tells them that Camille is scary. Very interested in knowing what he means by this, but if he's right, then perhaps Robert and Camille are two peas in a pod. Okay, so this might be the biggest reveal of the episode, or the lead up to it. At least it is for Juliet. So she's still going through it, but she hasn't stopped looking for the helmet that fits her suit. She manages to find the room where the suits are kept, but no luck on the helmet. This is when she finds a memo that clues her into the fact that a helmet had been quote-unquote borrowed from the department, and it must have been someone who worked in that department. So she's got a lead. She just needs the names and the addresses and she can get started looking. Now, a little later on in the episode, she finds a list of names from the department with the addresses, and she heads over to the apartment that used to be owned by a Trina Samuel. Now, it's when she's in the apartment and she picks up a drawing of Trina Samuel and a man named Cole Myers, who was nicknamed Solo, that we run into a little problem. This is a problem because it means our Solo is pretending to be this guy, the real former IT shadow of Silo 17. Someone's got some explaining to do. The opportunity comes when Solo returns with more of those tins of food. Juliet confronts him with this information and his response is surprising. At first, he tries to play it off, but once he's cornered, he's a man possessed. He goes on a rage-filled rant where he insists that he is Solo, and you get the sense that he's about to snap. Maybe you could say he already snapped. This man needs to believe he is Solo for some reason, and given that the real Solo was the IT Shadow, keeping the vault's contents a secret or at least safe, makes me think that the two things must be related. A good guess is that he needs to be Solo because of what Solo has access to. It may be that Solo has some kind of access or power that this guy needs to keep the silo running or some other function within the silo. Bernard mentioned something called legacy in the last episode, but he doesn't go into any details, so we have no idea what it really is, but it sounds like a program that silo bosses use to run the silo or train. At least that's the current assumption. Whatever it may be, this person sees himself as the caretaker of the vault, a responsibility that he either assumed out of necessity or maybe the role was given to him by Russell or someone else after the rebellion, but it appears to be the reason why he's taken the Solo name. It's still hard to say, but it makes some sense if it's true. Now back in the lowers of Silo 18, Billings and Hank figure out how to find Patrick by getting a hold of a relative who's been helping him by bringing him supplies. It's important to note that neither Billings nor Hank believe that Mechanical is responsible for Meadows' death, but they have to be careful about how they move when it comes to this investigation regardless. In the next scene, the Sims fam are engaged in some pillow talk. Now, I could be mistaken, but it seems as though Camille isn't telling Robert what she's been up to, because he doesn't appear to know that Knox and Shirley are stashed away. Why is she manipulating him instead of telling him her plans? Or a better question is, does she have an agenda of her own here? Just how dangerous is this woman? Later on in the episode, the new head of security, Amundsen, is reluctant to tell Bernard that Camille has been getting involved in manipulating events. This looks like a bad sign, given this face, and right now it's looking as though Camille may be in big trouble with Bernard. If he does something to her, I have no doubt we'll see the face turn we've been waiting for from Sims. So Knox and Shirley are on the move again, but Shirley's got something planned that requires them to go up instead of down. So they pay a visit to that snake, Calvin. This time it's just to liberate his winch pulley to use as an elevator of sorts. They take a huge risk here, but it pays off because they're able to move down several floors violently, but in a matter of seconds, and they did need a little help from the locals. Now back over to Lucas and Bernard. Now Lucas was able to retrieve a decent amount of data, including the letter that Bernard wanted, but we have to talk about the fact that Mr. Kyle here also discovered that IT and Judicial have that external power line that we talked about earlier, in addition to the tunnel at the bottom of the silo that we already knew about. But note here, Bernard pretends not to know about the tunnel, or at least he never mentions that he's aware of it. It makes me wonder if he's always known and he was pretending that he did not know the time when Juliet told him about it back in season 1 before her sentencing. Does this mean that he knows about the external power source, but he's feigning ignorance so as not to unnecessarily divulge anything to Kyle? Can't really trust this guy. Anyway, I think the key takeaway is that the encoded part of the letter is the real prize, but we don't learn anything else about it other than the fact that the first part of it is a love letter. Hank and Billings finally manage to find Patrick, but this dude is in a bad way. Patrick doesn't trust that they're here to help. In fact, he thinks they're there to put him out of his misery. Now, Billings alleviates the paranoia by revealing the relic he's got on his possession and how it could easily get him sent out to clean. So now that things are square, Patrick tells Billings he'll reveal all if he gets him some proper medical attention. So the deal is on. Meanwhile, back at the top, Bernard is beginning to lose control of things, as 3 of the 4 members of the fugitive group have managed to escape his grasp. Imagine if he had just listened to Meadows in the first place, he might have avoided all of this. So it looks like Bernard is going to have to depend on Billings to handle things from down there in the depths. Will Billings do the right thing here and try to exonerate them going against Bernard? I think we already know the answer to that. So this Solo guy, we don't really know his deal yet. Whatever happened to him during or after the rebellion has clearly broken him. Juliet is understandably terrified at this display, and to be honest, this complete 180-degree turn in his demeanor is a sure sign that she needs to keep her distance, at least for now. But there's still the issue of the infection that's been getting progressively worse. It's starting to look like she doesn't have a lot of time left. So at the end of the day, it looks like this Solo imposter is Juliet's only hope of surviving. That's a tough spot to be in. Remember, this is for people who have not read the book, so please no book spoilers. Question number 1. What do you think those power lines that they discovered imply? And do you think Bernard actually knew about this stuff? Second question is, what is going on with Solo? Why does he feel the need to call himself Solo? And thirdly, has any of this changed your theories or added new ones? For me, this has definitely opened up some new doors. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you already know what to do. Thanks once again to the patrons and all of the regular tinfoilers who come through. This channel has been growing at an amazing pace, and I have you to thank for it. Anyway, that's it for now. As always, be careful out there, tinfoilers. Remember to be kind to yourself, and until next time, off you go.